that. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Superintendent Brian Milne. The Traffic Division, which houses our impaired countermeasures, falls under my portfolio. I'd like to do some introductions as well today for some other people that are in the room. At the back of the room, we have Deputy Minister of Justice and the Deputy Attorney General for the province of Manitoba, Jeremy Akerstream. We also have to my right Patrol Sergeant Stefan Fontaine from WPS Traffic Division. He's the Impaired Driving Countermeasures Coordinator. We also have Tanya Hansen-Pratt, who is President of MAD Canada. And also at the back of the room, we have our partners from MPI, Patrick Sargensen, Registrar of Motor Vehicles, as well as Satvir Jatana, who's the Chief Customer Officer for MPI. So I'm going to provide some opening comments, and then we're going to move to Patrol Sergeant Stefan Fontaine and Tanya Hansen-Pratt for some comments as well. So impaired driving continues to be a risk to public safety and to the users of our roadways in Manitoba. Each year we still hear about tragic consequences as a result of the choice to drive while under the influence, yet it remains 100% preventable. While messaging has been loud and clear in relation to driving under the influence of alcohol and has been going on for many decades, with the legalization of cannabis and its derivatives in 2018, it's added an additional layer of challenges in relation to education and enforcement action by law enforcement. Driving under the influence of cannabis and other drugs is equally dangerous as driving under the influence of alcohol. So we are here today to formally launch and announce the steps the Winnipeg Police Service is taking to combat driving under the influence of cannabis and other drugs, evidenced by the concerning results we have seen thus far in the city of Winnipeg since the targeted enforcement portion of our actions commenced on July 16th of this year. Our impaired countermeasures coordinator, Patrol Sergeant Stefan Fontaine, will provide further details in relation to those actions and also provide you some of the statistics which we do find concerning. So in partnership with the federal government, the provincial government, Manitoba Public Insurance, and MAD Canada, we are undertaking an education campaign through a series of multimedia ads, along with continued and additional targeted enforcement actions to identify those who choose to drive under the influence of cannabis and other drugs and remove them from our roadways. So with that being said, I'm now going to turn the floor over to Patrol Sergeant Fontaine, who will share some further details on our efforts.
Good afternoon. I'll start by saying that alcohol is by far the most used drug in North America. And we're all too familiar with its dangers associated with driving while under its influence. What's not as common is the fact that aside from alcohol, cannabis is the second most commonly used drug in this country. Now, driving under the influence of cannabis is equally as dangerous. One major side effect of cannabis is that it interferes with a person's ability to divide their attention and multitask. More specifically, they have difficulty dealing with more than one or two things at a time. Since driving is a multitasking behavior, doing it while under the influence of cannabis becomes very dangerous. The myth that cannabis makes me a better driver is simply wrong. Just yesterday morning, for example, a commercial truck driver was pulled over for a routine vehicle inspection. And that driver was subsequently found to be under the influence of cannabis. The driver claimed that he consumes cannabis to help deal with his anxiety. No matter what your reasons are for choosing to consume cannabis, understand that driving under its influence is dangerous and illegal. I can report that 5 days into our drug-impaired driving enforcement project, we've conducted 48 roadside oral fluid tests. And out of those 48, 23 were found to be positive for the recent consumption of cannabis. This further supports the need to educate people on the dangers of driving under the influence of cannabis and to continue our enforcement efforts. What we're finding is that there are many misconceptions. One is that cannabis somehow makes you a better driver. Well, that's simply wrong. The stats show that the risk of getting into a collision more than doubles for cannabis users. People just don't appreciate the dangers of getting behind the wheel while high. Another misconception is that, well, police can't enforce it. Well, wrong again. Law enforcement indeed have the tools and the training to detect drug-impaired drivers, no matter what the impairing substance is. The consequences for getting arrested and charged for driving while impaired by drugs are exactly the same as they are for driving while impaired by alcohol. Whether impaired by alcohol, cannabis, or any other drug, driving under the influence can have deadly consequences. We hope that this media campaign will bring light to this dangerous behavior and encourage drivers to make the right decision. Our message is simple. Don't drive high. It's dangerous, detectable, and definitely illegal. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm now going to invite Tanya Hansen-Pratt, President of MAD Canada, to share a few words.
Hello, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here today on behalf of MAD Canada and our Manitoba chapters and community leaders to show our support to the Winnipeg Police Service for this great enforcement and awareness campaign. We know that drug-impaired driving has been on the rise for quite some time. We also know that there are a lot of misperceptions, as we already heard today, about driving under the influence of drugs. That is especially true with cannabis. Many people don't think cannabis affects their ability to drive. But studies show that cannabis can have a negative impact on driving, including reduced concentration and attention span, slower reaction time, and an altered perception of time and distance. Many people also don't think that police can detect cannabis or other drugs in drivers. But police have oral testing devices and officers specially trained as drug recognition experts. Ongoing education and awareness is crucial to dispelling the misperceptions about drug-impaired driving. And we thank the Winnipeg Police Service for their work on this campaign. It will remind people that driving under the influence of drugs is dangerous and illegal. That police are always on the lookout for drug-impaired drivers, and that police have the tools and training to detect them. We hope to see it change minds and attitudes about drug-impaired driving, and most importantly, change risky behaviors. I want to say a quick word of thanks to the Winnipeg Police Service and all the police we work with. Police are among our most important partners in MAD Canada's mission to end impaired driving and to support victims. They support the efforts of our chapter and community leader volunteers, many of whom are victims and survivors themselves. Just 3 months ago, we hosted our Project Red Ribbon Holiday Awareness Campaign, and the Winnipeg Police Service and the Manitoba Public Insurance were there to help us do that. We're happy to be here to support you with this campaign today and all throughout the month. Finally, I want to urge every member of the public to make a commitment to never drive impaired. Whether it's cannabis or other drugs or alcohol, it is never worth the risk. Not to yourself, to your passengers or other drivers on the road, not to innocent people who are simply out for their morning walk, as my mother, Burl Hansen, was doing when she was struck and killed by an impaired driver, a driver who had been consuming alcohol and cannabis. Please plan ahead for a sober ride. It only takes a few minutes, and it can prevent a lifetime of grief and heartache. Thank you again for having me here today.
Thank you very much, Tanya, for those words. Okay, so now I would like to introduce elements of our media campaign. So through the month of February, we are, and the public can expect to see a number of elements, including electronic messaging through social media, as well as billboards, roadside billboards, as well as a video. I'd like to note, I think this is very important to note, that everything that you see here today was developed in-house by our Public Information Office, a team of professionals who put together all of the products that you see in front of us today. And actually used members of the Winnipeg Police Service, one of which who is at the back of the room here today, to star in the video. So I'm just going to speak to the poster boards and the billboards that we're going to see across the month. So through the month of February. First off, we stuck with the federal theme of Don't Drive High, and then we've also added our own messaging in at the bottom here that was developed by the WPS PIO team. It's dangerous, detectable, and definitely illegal. So these are a couple examples that we are going to see across Winnipeg. So with that, we will do the video, 15-second video.
Hi.
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 Don't drive high. It's dangerous, detectable, and definitely illegal. It's dangerous, detectable, and definitely illegal.
Thank you. Okay, so the video, I've been asked to mention that it is going to be provided in a digital format for those who would like that. And with that, I'm going to open the floor up to any potential questions.
Can you just clarify when this started?
So there's two components to our campaign. One is an enforcement side of it, which started January 16th of this year, where we are targeting drivers that may have been consuming cannabis or other drugs. And the media campaign is launching today. So we put out a media release, I believe it was January 19th, indicating the initial results of our first run on January 16th. And I believe Patrol Sergeant Fontaine may have more information on this, but I believe we've run 4 or 5 targeted campaigns, enforcement side.
Why this campaign now? Why launch it today specifically? Or is there like a trend or something that you're seeing that you felt this campaign is necessary to have right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So back in the, I believe it it was the fall of last year, we had done something similar to this. Not the media piece, of course, but the enforcement side of it. And we saw with that action, we saw some concerning results. So with that, we challenged some of our members in our countermeasures team, our traffic members, to come up with a strategy to combat this. I think it's only common sense that that if cannabis is legal, as is alcohol, liquor, we are going to see people that are not following the rules that choose to consume and drive. So.
Yeah, and I guess like the results that you guys have listed here, I'd imagine like that's since the 16th. Like, how do you sort of like classify those results? Like, are they concerning to police or?
Yeah, that's very concerning to police. If you do the math on that, we're looking at almost 50%. So 1 in 2 drivers that are stopped have consumed cannabis, whether it's through officer or begins as officer observations and then confirmed through some of the equipment which we have on display up front here through oral fluid samples. That would be just as concerning and equally alarming that if we stopped 1,000 vehicles during check stop for alcohol during the holiday season and we had 500 impaired drivers, we would be very concerned. So this is no different.
Just a question for Mr. Fontaine. I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about how dispatch works in terms of impaired driving calls. So not necessarily when a person is stopped in a traffic stop, but say at the scene of an accident, Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service responds, they identify that maybe there's a suspected impaired driver here. Are Winnipeg Police dispatched to the scene and how does that process work?
Yes, as soon as there's a suspicion or a report of a suspected impaired driver, that would summons the police, a call for service. Depending on the seriousness of the collision, of course, we're going to get there as quickly as we possibly can. But whenever there's a suspected impairment aspect to a collision, for example, then police are dispatched to investigate.
And so it's ranked in kind of priority level in terms of how serious the accident is and that sort of thing.
Well, having a suspected impaired driver, it gives it a higher priority. Absolutely.
We've heard from the Winnipeg Fire Paramedic Service from members who spoke to the Free Press anonymously that sometimes they're waiting a half hour or longer for police to respond. Do you know if that, can you confirm whether that's the case and maybe speak to what would lead to longer response times in a situation like that?
I don't have those details to provide you.
Okay. And do you know, is there a dispatcher who would send officers out to the scene of a suspected impaired driver, or is that kind of done more by a self-dispatch method? So the call comes up and then the officers in the cruiser themselves decide, whether they're going to respond to the scene.
Well, it depends. You're asking some pretty specific questions on how we dispatch our resources. And the short answer is it will depend. If a unit is available and possibly nearby, they may attach themselves to that call. If there are units available to respond, then they will be assigned and they will attend.
And I mean, you may not be able to offer specifics on this, but how often are these kinds of calls coming in? Like, how often or how common occurrence is it for police to get a call from Fire Paramedic Service? Hey, we have a suspected impaired driver. We'd like you guys to come down and take a look.
Yeah, I don't have that information for you.
Thank you.
With ways to detect cannabis now growing and being better than ever, why do you feel that drivers are still feeling comfortable getting on the road high? Is the deterrent not big enough, or are they just misunderstanding, the consequences of driving high?
Yeah, I think all of those points, right? So, and that's part of this media campaign is to reiterate the concerns and reiterate our stance on the dangers of driving while under the influence. There, like I mentioned before, there seems to be these misconceptions that it's not as bad as alcohol, and that's just simply wrong. And through enforcement action and hopefully some media campaigns here, we're going to continue to push that messaging across. Everyone is very used to hearing don't drink and drive. We have to have that same effect when we talk about don't drive while high.
Sorry.
Okay, a clarifying question on the media campaign. Is this also a partnership between Winnipeg Police and MPI, or simply Winnipeg Police?
Yeah, I can speak to that. So a number of years ago, the federal government announced funding that went out to all of the different provinces to counteract drug-impaired driving with the legalization of cannabis. So the funding moves through, or at least flowed from the federal government into the provincial government for disbursement. So that is where we receive the funding to run the multimedia campaign. In terms of funding to support our enforcement efforts, our partners at Manitoba Public Insurance has helped to fund a portion of that. You're welcome.
I just had a quick question actually for Tanya, if you don't mind. I know you talked about that's your mother in the poster back there. Are you sort of able to talk about, your experience and your family's experience with this, with impaired driving?
My mom was out for a walk in south of Portage la Prairie on April 20th, 1999, which was a Tuesday morning. And she went on that walk every day. She had just retired early and went for a morning walk, as she always did. And she was struck from behind by an impaired driver traveling in excess of 150 kilometers an hour. And she died instantly. So that was that breaking point in our lives where we had the before and the after. And this is the after that we have to deal with. And impaired drivers don't think of that. They believe the consequences end at the crash scene, and they simply don't. For the rest of us, we live the rest of our lives with an empty chair.
And how was that experience, I guess, shaped why you want to do this kind of work that you're doing now?
My brother is a police officer, and so when Mom was killed, he immediately told the rest of our family to contact MAD for support. And we did. We reached out to MAD, and MAD has been there for us all along. This entire 25 years, MAD has been there supporting us and taking care of us in a way that no one else could, because they are a family of people that understand what we've been through. And so now I run a national support group for people who have lost loved ones online. I run that for other people across Canada. One of several people that do that with MAD. So it was important for me to give back to this organization that's been there for me for so long.
And what do you hope this campaign that's launching today specifically, I guess, deters people from driving impaired here in Winnipeg?
Well, the numbers are astounding, not surprising, but astounding to me. And so I really hope that the public takes this campaign to heart and that we can have the same amount of ownership with the don't drive high messaging that we have with don't drive drunk messaging. It's really important. People often brush it off and say, I'm actually a better driver when I'm high, and that is clearly not the case. So we really need for the public to understand that it's not worth the risk.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
Okay, so thank you very much for attending this afternoon. And with that, we're going to conclude I invite those who are interested to come forward. Patrol Sergeant Fontaine is going to stand by and answer any questions and demo some of the equipment that we have on hand to detect cannabis use. Thank you and good afternoon.